The summons. The telephone at Gatcombe Park rarely rang after 10 p.m. Princess, and at 74 maintained military precision in her schedule. Early to bed, earlier to rise, no exceptions. But the phone in her private study broke the silence at 10:47 on a Tuesday evening in March. And knew, before answering, that something had shifted. "Ma'am, it's Dr. Harrison, the King's personal physician." His voice carried the weight of carefully chosen words. "His Majesty has asked me to call you. He'd like to see you first thing tomorrow, alone." Anne's hand tightened on the receiver. Her brother had been ill. The palace had announced as much 3 weeks prior, but the carefully worded statements had suggested management, not crisis. This call told a different story. "How bad?" she asked, cutting through protocol. A pause. "He's asking for you, ma'am. That should tell you what you need to know." Dawn broke gray over Gloucester as Anne's Range Rover pulled away from Gatcombe Park. Her security detail followed at a discreet distance, and drove herself, one of the few privileges she'd refused to surrender. The 2-hour drive to Windsor gave her time to think, to remember, to prepare for what waited. She and Charles had never been close in the way siblings in ordinary families might be. 17 months apart in age, but worlds apart in destiny. He was the heir. She was the spare, expected to be useful, but never central. Yet they shared something deeper than affection, understanding. They'd both spent lifetimes in service to an institution that demanded everything and acknowledged little. The last time he'd summoned her like this was when their mother was dying, and had been the only one the Queen trusted to hear certain truths, to execute certain final wishes, without sentiment clouding judgment. Now history was repeating, and Anne felt the weight of that responsibility settling on shoulders that had carried it before. Windsor Castle's private apartments were quiet, the usual bustle of staff reduced to whispers and careful footsteps. Anne was escorted not to the formal receiving rooms, but to Charles's personal study, the one place in all his residences where he could be simply himself. He sat by the window, morning light, harsh on features that had thinned considerably. At 76, Charles looked every one of his years and several more besides, but his eyes were clear when they met Anne's, and his voice was steady. "Thank you for coming. You're my brother." And settled into the chair across from him, noting the legal documents on the side table, the sealed envelope bearing his personal crest. "Though I assume this isn't a social call." "It's not." Charles attempted a smile that didn't quite form. "The doctors give me 6 months, perhaps less." And absorbed this without flinching. He paused, searching for the word, too much like father. "What are you talking about, Harry?" The name hung between them like an accusation. "I'm talking about Harry." Charles had never been comfortable with emotional vulnerability. 76 years of training had armored him against displays of weakness, but facing mortality had a way of stripping such armor, leaving only truth. When he left, when he said those things in interviews, I told myself he'd chosen his path, that he'd made his bed and must lie in it. Charles's hands trembled slightly on the envelope. I convinced myself that my duty was to the institution, not to one disgruntled son who couldn't accept his role. "You weren't wrong," Anne said carefully. "I wasn't entirely right either." Charles finally opened the envelope and withdrew several pages of his distinctive handwriting. "I wrote this 3 weeks ago, after the diagnosis. A letter to both of them, William and Harry, separately and together. Instructions for after I'm gone." And took the pages he offered and began reading. "Charles, this is necessary, essential. The one thing I can do that might matter more than any policy or decree." He leaned forward, urgency replacing the earlier fragility. "But it has to be delivered correctly by the right person at the right moment with the right words to make them actually listen. And you think I'm that person? You're the only person. William trusts your judgment." "Absolutely. Harry remembers you differently from how he remembers the rest of us. You were never part of the machinery that he felt crushed by. You were just Aunt and who told him uncomfortable truths and expected him to be better." And read through the letter twice, understanding dawning with each word. Charles wasn't just leaving instructions for his sons. He was attempting to heal a wound that had festered for years, to use his death as a catalyst for something he'd been unable to achieve in life. Reconciliation. This will be difficult, she said finally. For all of them. Everything worthwhile is difficult. Charles's voice carried an edge of his old authority. But if I die with them still estranged, with William and Harry still at odds, then I failed as a father far more profoundly than I failed as anything else. William will resist. He sees Harry's departure as betrayal, which is why the letter addresses that Wyatt reveals things neither of them knows about what really happened, about decisions I made that shaped their conflict. Charles stood with effort, moved to the window overlooking the gardens where he and Diana had once walked with their young sons. I'm not asking you to fix everything, Anne. I'm asking you to give them the tools to fix it themselves. And folded the pages carefully and slipped them back into the envelope. When do you want me to do this? Soon. Before the announcement. They deserve to hear this before the world knows I'm dying. He turned to face her. And there's one more thing. From his desk drawer, he withdrew a smaller envelope sealed with wax. This one's just for you to be opened after. It explains why you're the only one I could trust with this. And left Windsor 2 hours later. The envelopes locked in her briefcase, the weight of her brother's final wish heavy on her conscience. She'd agreed, because she always agreed when duty called. But more than that, she'd agreed, because Charles was right. If the monarchy survived his death only to be defined by his son's continued estrangement, then what was the point of any of it? The drive back to Gatcombe Park felt longer than the morning's journey. Anne's phone showed 17 missed calls, palace business, charity obligations, the endless machinery of royal life. She ignored them all. Instead, she thought about 2 boys she'd watched grow up in impossible circumstances. William, groomed from birth to be king, carrying the weight of destiny with Diana's empathy and Charles's sense of duty. Harry, the spare, brilliant, and damaged, and desperate to be seen as more than his brother's shadow. They'd both lost so much: their mother too young, their privacy to constant scrutiny, their brotherhood to competing narratives and palace politics, and now they were about to lose their father. The question was whether that loss would break them further apart or finally, impossibly bring them back together. The Revelation Kensington Palace at dawn held a particular quality of purpose. William had been awake since 5, reviewing briefings for the day's engagements, responding to correspondence that never stopped flowing. At 42, he'd perfected the art of compartmentalization, his personal feelings locked away while he performed the role he'd been born to play. Catherine found him in his study, coffee gone cold, the same page of his briefing book unread for 20 minutes. "You're worried about something?" she observed, settling into the chair across from his desk, and called. "She's coming here this morning. Wouldn't say why. Just that it's urgent and private." Catherine's expression shifted. "And didn't do drama, didn't make unnecessary trips to London. If she was coming, it mattered. Your father, probably." William sat down the briefing book he'd been pretending to read. The palace statements have been carefully vague. Too carefully. "You should call him." "I've tried. His office keeps saying he's unavailable, that they'll arrange something soon." William's frustration bled through the careful control, which means it's worse than they're admitting. The intercom buzzed. "Sir, the Princess Royal has arrived," and had dressed for battle, a simple navy suit that conveyed seriousness without melodrama. She declined tea, declined small talk, and got directly to the point once Catherine had tactfully excused herself. "Your father is dying, 6 months at most," and delivered the news the way she approached everything, direct, unsentimental, efficient. "I'm telling you now, he wanted you to hear it from me first before the official briefings begin," and withdrew the envelope from her briefcase, "and he wanted you to have this." William took the letter, his father's handwriting immediately recognizable. "What is this?" "His final wish. What he wants from you, from both of you, before he dies. Both of us." William's voice went cold. "You mean Harry?" "Yes, I mean Harry." William set the letter down unopened. "Then this conversation is finished." "William?" "No." He stood and paced to the window. I've spent 4 years watching my brother attack this family, attack Catherine, sell out our privacy for Netflix money and Oprah confessions. And now father wants me to what? Forgive and forget because he's dying. Anne's voice remained level. He wants you to read the letter. What you do after is your choice. William didn't read it immediately. He let it sit on his desk for 3 hours while he attended a charity engagement, smiled for cameras, and demonstrated the composure expected of a future king. But the letter's presence haunted him, a weight that couldn't be ignored. Finally, alone in his study that evening, he opened it. My dearest William, if you're reading this, Anne has told you about my condition. I'm sorry you had to learn of it this way, but there are things I need to say without the formality of official meetings or the pressure of immediate decisions. I'm going to tell you something I should have told you years ago. I'm the reason Harry left. Not entirely, of course. He made his choices. William's hand trembled as he continued reading. The letter detailed conversations Charles had never shared. Decisions made in the wake of Diana's death that had inadvertently placed William and Harry on diverging paths. Charles described how his own trauma, his guilt over Diana, his desperate attempt to protect William as the heir had led him to create different rules, different expectations for each son. I told Harry when he was 18 that his role was to support you, never overshadow you, that he needed to accept being secondary. I thought I was being practical, preparing him for reality. Instead, I told a grieving teenager that he mattered less than his brother. The letter continued, revealing palace decisions that Harry had attributed to William, but had actually come from Charles. Staff reassignments isolated Harry. Press strategies that protected William's image at Harry's expense. Financial arrangements that left Harry feeling dependent and controlled. You thought he was jealous of you. He thought you were complicit in his marginalization. The truth is, I created a system that pitted you against each other, then stepped back and let you blame each other for the results. William read the letter 3 times. Each reading revealed new layers of manipulation. Not malicious, but damaging nonetheless. His father had been trying to protect the institution, to secure the succession, to prevent the mistakes of previous generations. But in doing so, he'd created new wounds. The final section was direct in its plea. Before I die, I want to see my sons reconciled. Not for me. I don't deserve that peace. For yourselves, for your children who deserve to know their cousins, for the monarchy that cannot survive another generation of public family warfare. I've written a similar letter to Harry explaining the same truths. What I'm asking from both of you is this. Me talk. Not with lawyers or mediators or press strategies. Just 2 brothers who lost their mother too young and are about to lose their father trying to find their way back to each other. Anne.